Hey guys, this is example 4 on solving for the core of an exchange economy. Let's go. So again, we're going to be considering the same 2 by 2 setup. This time preferences are going to be perfect substitutes here, where our consumer A is going to be consuming the minimum between XA and 2YA. And consumer B is going to have these multiplicative preferences. Again, the size of our economy is going to be 1 by 1, meaning that there's going to be a measure of 1 of good X and 1 of good Y, and the endowments are going to be split equally across consumers. So the way we're going to go and solve this problem is that we're going to note our consumers' utilities from consuming the endowments. And step number 2, this has changed from our previous steps, is that we're going to write out an optimality condition. This is because one of our functions here is not differentiable. Step number 3 is that we're going to use the resource constraint to derive 2 versions of the contract curve. Step number 4 is that we're going to say, using this contract curve, utility functions, and initial utilities, we're going to solve for the allocation, which constitutes the core of the economy. And step number 5 is that we're going to find over what range and conditions does the core exist by writing down the contract curve, resource constraint, and the range where the core is present. So step number 1 is that we're going to note the consumer's utilities from just consuming the endowment. For consumer A, it's going to be 1/2, and for consumer B, it's going to be 1/4. Step 2 and 3, I'm just putting them together. We're going to note that the optimality condition for consumer A is going to be written as XA is equal to 2Y. This is just because of the perfect complements type of utility function, the Leontief sort of preferences. We're just going to be using a no waste condition to go and define that contract curve from the consumer's perspective. And using this resource constraint, we know an alternative way to view this contract curve is written as the following. From consumer B's perspective, this is going to be XB is equal to 2YB. For step number 4, we're going to be using the contract curves, the utility functions, and our initial utilities to solve for the allocation, which constitutes the core of the economy. For consumer A, he must consume XA and 2YA, right? Or, the minimum of those 2 quantities, or, consume proportionally to those, such that it's greater than or equal to 1/2. And that is going to be where XA is equal to 1/2 or YA is equal to 1/4, as communicated by the no waste condition of these sort of preferences. For consumer B, we're going to be subbing in our result from our contract curve, and that simplifies to 2YB squared must be greater than or equal to 1/4. Dividing both sides by 2 and taking the square root of both sides, we get that YB is equal to the square root of 1/8, and XB is going to be 2 times the square root of 1/8 there. So concluding with step number 5 is that we're going to define now over what range of conditions does the core exist. So we have the contract curve from either consumer A or consumer B's perspective, which is going to be defined as X is equal to 2Y, just overall across the board. We're just going to change the subscript just to denote whose perspective we're seeing it from. We are going to have a resource constraint here, which is going to go and define, what is the size of our economy that we're going and dealing with, and then we're going to define what exactly the core is, which is going to, communicate, what are the points or the end points, of this allocation, where we go and we start, and from there we work inwards. So for consumer A, it's going to be 1/2 and 1/4. And for consumer B, right, it's going to be 2 times the square root of 1/8 and the square root of 1/8 for good YB. So that's this video on solving for the core of our economy. I hope this series has helped. Take care.